knowledge from the masses throughout history right up to this very day. Lessons of the Egyptian mystery schools, the secrets of Freemasons, the codes of the Kabbalistic tree of life, sacred geometry, and the natural patterns that make up the architecture of our universe. And many of us at this stage of the game recognize that there's something there, some natural truth, some enlightening insight. But without the initiations, rituals, and the secret meetings around the sacred statue of Moloch, it's damn near impossible to put the whole puzzle together. Well, today's guest, Marty Leeds, has been working hard on some of these aspects of the great code of our reality. And when you add Marty's pieces to the puzzle, I think the picture starts to get a lot more clear, although complicated. Marty is a self-proclaimed mathemagician and the author of 3 books, Pi and the English Alphabet, Volumes 1 and 2, and The Peacock's Tales. His 3rd book in the series, Pi and the English Alphabet, is slated for release in early 2015. He has an ongoing YouTube lecture series and an online radio show discussing everything from myth, math, spirituality, philosophy, sacred geometry, lost civilizations, and the holy sciences. A scholar, a gentleman, and an all-around badass. Marty, my man, welcome to THC.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, this is great. Thanks for being here. I watched about 10 hours of you teaching about the mathematical code embedded in our alphabet, the Bible, and a whole host of other areas, and it's impressive, man, but it seems so hard to talk about. I mean, how do you usually break people into this topic?
Yeah, that's the difficult thing that I have when I do these podcasts is explaining this stuff on the air, because we are dealing with, a lot of it is dealing with symbolism, a lot of it's dealing with geometry and mathematics, and a lot of times when you have these conversations, you can get lost. So gematria is the art of assigning numbers to letters. And so basically what the work that I'm engaged in is focused on is looking at this phenomenon through the English language. So basically the idea is that when the 26 letters of the modern English alphabet was formed, it was formed using a mathematical structure, what's known as a cryptogram or a cipher. And we'll go into this, but we can explain how the numbers to the letters, how this whole thing works. Now, we need a little history here before we can go into that, because gematria has been known for a very long time. Some of the major languages, especially that the Bible has been written into, 2 of the main ones being Greek and Hebrew, absolutely had ciphers for the languages, meaning that the construction, the syntax, the orthography, how languages are put together, how words are formed, and things that are behind names and concepts and ideas. There's mathematics behind there, and so we know for a fact that Greek and Hebrew had this. So all I'm doing is my thesis is saying that yes, there is absolutely one that was created for the English language, and that we can start to understand this, and we can understand it through the symbols and ideas and things that we find in like the Freemasonic square and compasses, for instance, the Jewish menorah, the tetragrammaton, things like this, and we'll go into some of this. But that's basically what the focus of my study is. But this brings in so many different aspects of our reality into one holistic study, though, because it's done through our language. So we could look at symbols, we can look at astrology, we can look at astronomy, we can look at, like I said, secret societies, we can look at names and concepts in the Bible, we can look at games such as chess and dice and billiards and backgammon, and we can look at these and find out that every single one of these things has a mathematical foundation. And so that's basically what gematria is in a nutshell. And as your intro said, I have a whole lecture series where I go and look at particular things. Like I said, billiards. I do a whole video on billiards. Chess. I do one on chess. I do a video on the name of Jesus Christ, breaking down the mathematics of it. And like I said, there's probably, I think there's like 50 or 60 videos on there, and I've got a bunch more I'm working on. So,
yeah, and no problem. And that's a pretty good introduction, and it seems super fun. I mean, I've heard you say, this was kind of interesting, that most people think of numbers as just quantities. You know, I've got 3 books or 2 apples, or I performed 6 ritual sacrifices. But numbers, they can also be a quality. Can you explain that distinction? That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very, very important thing to understand when we look at mathematics. And this is something that basically within the modern understanding of mathematics that's being taught in our, the universities and things like that, I would say is kind of basically wholly dismissed, is that numbers have qualities to them. And every single number does. So when you look at a number like 2, you're not just looking at 2 apples or 2 oranges or, et cetera, like that. You're actually looking at what does the number 2 mean? Well, we can go out into the universe and see that the number 2 has a quality to it. And when you look at the number 2, it has a black and a white, a yin and a yang, an up and a down, that sort of thing. This is what's known in philosophy as the reconciliation of opposites, or the coincidentia positorum. So we can look at a number like 2 and say there's a quality to it. We can also bring in the geometry of this and see that it has a quality. So we're not just looking at the quantity. We're looking at, hey, what is the number 2 in geometry? Well, it's just 2 points. That doesn't create any sort of plane or any space for movement. There's nothing spatial about it. Now let's go to the number 3. Well, 3 is not just, once again, it's not just quantity, not just 3 oranges. You actually have 1, 2, 3 points that come together to create a triangle. And this is what you could call the embryonic polygon of creation. But it's the first geometric form that you can create in 2-dimensional space. So therefore, by the very nature of its geometry, it has a quality to it. It has, that sort of thing. This is what numerology really is the study of. Now, when I say numerology, a lot of chances are a lot of people are just going to be like, oh, he's a numerologist. This guy's a kook, a crank, a charlatan kind of thing, right? Because that's a lot of times that's what numerologists are. They're full of shit, But what numerology really is number logic. That's what numerology means. Ology means the study of, or logic, and then numer means number. So basically, all numerology is, the entire study of numerology is understanding that there's number logic. So when we look, there's basically 2 forms, or two sides of the study of mathematics. It's the quantitative and the qualitative. And it's only when we merge these two do we get the full understanding, a full comprehension of what this study is. And so that's what's important. And really, the problem is that we've been taught mathematics from our federal education system. Right. Which is god fucking awful. I mean, it really is. Yeah. And so when people approach mathematics, they see mathematics in this very cold, clinical, dry. It's really convoluted and ugly. And really, when as I'm an autodidact, I study all this stuff myself. I didn't graduate college or anything like that. I just pursued this study myself. And when I went into it, I realized that there's a harmony, there's beauty within this stuff. And it's actually, when you get down to brass taxes and the nitty gritty of it, it's really simple, and you can understand these things and you can see them all around the world. So,
yeah, man, I'm sure you get this all the time, but I've never liked math. Kind of like what you're getting
every show I do, man, every single show.
And just like you, I dropped out of college, and there were 1,000 factors, but math was a huge one. And I've done so much learning since then. It's kind of ironic, but I was just done with it at the time. And as I've learned about sacred geometry and things like your work and playing with numbers and seeing them as more of an art, I have started to look at it differently. And it's kind of funny because now I'm looking back at people that I know in my life who really were more math people. And I'm like, I wonder if they just saw the art in it despite it never being shown. And that's just why they got it. Do you see that a lot more with people when you start to approach them with this side of the equation?
It's absolutely amazing how many people that have contacted me that have said, God, I hated math until you taught it to me, And I mean, that's my whole goal. I don't really even consider myself a writer or a researcher or anything like that, or even a mathematician or a linguist in any sort of capacity. I feel like I'm a teacher. And so I'm trying to, and of course I've made my own discoveries and things like that, but really what I'm trying to do is take everything that I've learned from all of these other fantastic and wonderful researchers and present it in this very clear-cut, very, terse, straightforward way that people can understand it. And I think that if we actually had an education system that did this, people would not be scared of math because they would be able to look down at a flower and see it and be like, oh, okay, that's the degree of phyllotaxis. Oh, that's the Fibonacci sequence. Oh, that's the seal of Solomon in the head of a flower, and you start to realize that what these, especially when, mentioning the seal of Solomon, what a lot of these ancient sacred, quote unquote, sacred symbols are actually referring to. They're referring to universal architecture. And this is what all of the ancient cultures understood. Any like golden age civilization or any sort of advanced civilization understood that there was a harmony, there's proportion, there's ratios, that there's a construction of our universe, and it's based on the canon of number. It's based on number and geometry. And these frequencies that we find within the number, this canon of sacred number that we find within sacred geometry, we find it within music as well. And we find it within time, we find it within space. Really what understanding numbers does is brings all of these things together and realize these are not separate things that we're studying here. It's not like we're going to study time and then we're going to study space and then we're going to study music and then we're going to study spatial relationships. No, we're going to bring it all together into one holistic study, and we can do that through the foundation of number.
And I think when you start to learn that stuff, as more synchronicities happen and more things connect, more dots connect, it just propels you to be more interested. And that's something that in 15 years of school just never happened. And I mean, on the subject of the school system, the thing for me is always, as a conspiracy-minded person, is this a purposeful thing or an unfortunate coincidence? But when I look at the school system, it's like...
It's purposeful.
Yeah, I mean, the elite, they have tried to hide this stuff and put a lot of effort into making it that way. So it seems like purposely making math boring is so people will avoid this type of study for the rest of their lives.
And that's exactly what we have.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's going on right now. I mean, I even look at it in the context of my own life. I mean, how long did I steer away from mathematics, even though apparently I'm somewhat inclined to be, understand mathematics. And yet I never touched it for years because I was like, I got a C in college algebra, man. And yet here I am writing books on pi. That's insane. I mean, if college was meant to actually teach you these things and high school was meant to actually teach you these things so you could understand it and take it out into the world and see your world and understand your world, then you'd be able to, you should be able to get it right away. I went through how many, mathematics courses and things like that, and it never struck to me. It was only when I went on my own to learn this stuff that I really got it. It's like that. And I feel like college, especially college, is pretty much a scam, when it really comes down to it. All of the things that you can learn in college, you can learn on your own. You don't need to go to, spend $60,000 to read Plato's Republic. You can just go to the local bookstore and pick it up for $1 or whatever. It's like that line in Good Will Hunting, where he says, you spent $150,000 on an education you could have got for $1.50 at late fines at the public library. Yeah. I mean, how true is that?
Exactly.
I mean, people are enslaved, in debt, enslaved by going to school to learn these things. And what are they doing? They're basically regurgitating something that is taught to them, as opposed to actually going out, learning this stuff and making your own discoveries.
Right.
I mean, there's actually a book called, what's it called? The Art of Scientific Investigation by W.B. Burbridge, I think is his name. I might be getting that wrong. But basically the whole book is about how all the discoveries of the world were discovered by people that had flashes, had revelations, that were out on their own discovering something. It's not like they were stuck in a classroom and all of a sudden the light came on. No. They were out learning this stuff themselves, and this is where true discoveries are made. People that are going against the grain, going against the status quo, going out on their own, going into the peripheries of thought, and pulling something out and bringing it back to humanity and saying, "Look, this makes sense. This can be verified."
Yeah.
And we actually have a lot of researchers in our own time, maybe thanks to the internet, maybe thanks to cosmic cycles, maybe thanks to how many people are on this planet, whatever it is, that are doing that right now, and that's what's so beautiful about our time.
Yeah, man, I totally agree with you. I think some of the most fascinating thinkers never really did that well in school, and it just makes so much sense that they wouldn't. But
didn't Albert Einstein flunk out?
Yeah, exactly. And Jacques Fresco is another guy, like he's a futurist. He heads the Venus Project. But yeah, he was done with school at like age 15, and he was just reading books in the library instead of going to class. I think it was even younger than that. It's just funny. And the college thing, the tuition aspect is a funny angle, because if any one of us had just 20 grand up front to start a business or start something, we could probably do amazingly well. But you're not even really allowed to do that. It isn't a choice, because they'll only give you the money for school. Yeah. There's no other thing that a person who's 18 with no credit or no assets can acquire a $20,000 loan. It's the only reason, and it's sad, it just is.
When I graduated high school, I was scared to the bone about what I was going to do with my life. And there was just an enormous amount of pressure to say, well, you better go to college. What are you going to get out and just, change oil for a living, as if there's anything wrong with being someone who changes your oil? There's nothing wrong with that. But, that was the whole pressure. It was like, what, are you going to be a loser the rest of your life? You better go to college and get that degree. Otherwise, and I fell, I fell victim to that. I did go to college for about a year and a half. And I remember when I was in college, I was a very curious person, and things that I ended up reading a lot of my own more so than I mean, I read more books on my own than I did in my college classes. You know, I remember reading Carl Sagan at that point. I was reading Edward Abbey at that point and things like that. And I remember I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? I'm reading more on my own in my college dorm than I was learning anything in college, you know.
Yeah.
And I need to, you know, a disclaimer here, whatever. It's not like I'm saying if you go to college you're an idiot or something like that. You know, I'm just saying that the things that you can learn there can be learned on your own, you know.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, we live in this time where it's like, well, you need that college degree to get a job. But now we even know that that's kind of bullshit. I know how many people that have graduated college that are not doing anything in their, you know, that they studied for. You know?
They have the same job they've been having part-time all through college. But let's dive into your work a little bit, man. I know it can get confusing, especially without a visual aid, but to decode something, you need a cipher, and you've uncovered a cipher for the English alphabet that reveals a lot of the sacred knowledge and some of the major traditions that we have in our culture. And it's going to be important for the audience to have a clear picture of the cipher so they'll understand the connections, right? I mean, I know you do this all the time. I guess lay that out for the people.
Okay. Yeah, to a little forward here, caveat before we start. Anything that I'm talking about here, I don't want you to believe me. I ask you not to believe me. Question everything I'm saying. Don't trust me. And then what I want you to do is go out and investigate this stuff yourself, because that's the most important thing. Because if I'm relaying any sort of quote unquote truth to you whatsoever, you should not have to believe me. It's something that you can verify for yourself. That's what science is. So that's the first thing I want to say. So anything I'm going to go over here, please double check this stuff. And what I've done is provide for absolutely free all the ways that you can go and understand this cipher and all the ways that you can use it. So like I said, I've got a bunch of lectures for free. I have a blog at world-mysteries.com. You can check all this stuff out absolutely free. So
perfect.
So what it is we have 26 letters of the English alphabet, right? And everybody knows it: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, A, and Z. These 26 letters, we can see what we can do is actually split them in half, split them in two chunks of letters. And we can go, and this would be a block of 13 and 13. And notice we're splitting in 13 and 13, and 13 has always been this unlucky number, right? Where, you know, there's a psychological thing called triskaidekaphobia, where you don't, you know, they won't even put a 13th floor in a building. Actually, in my apartment complex here, it goes from 12 to 14. I'm in apartment 14.
Wow.
There's no 13. Yeah. So there's this aversion throughout history to this number 13. Why? Well, you know, because of let's just say it, conspiracy.
Yeah.
You know, there's a reason for that, you know. So we're splitting the alphabet 26 letters into 13 letters and 13 letters, A through M and N through Z. Why are we doing this? What's the reason for this? Well, once again, as we kind of briefly touched on before, is this idea of the coincidentia positorum. It's this fundamental philosophical idea that permeates our entire reality. When you go out into the three-dimensional space and the fourth dimension of time, when we go out, we see this opposites, unity of opposites everywhere. This is what the yin yang symbol is expressing. This is what the Mayan Hunub Ku is expressing. This is ancient symbol of black swirling with white. This is left and right, opposites. Up and down, opposites. Forward, reverse, opposites. You know what I mean? This is your left hand and your right hand. Just look at your human body. You can split it right down the middle, and you have a left side mirroring the right side. So this is why we're taking the 26 letters of the English alphabet and splitting it in a block of 13 and 13, just because all we're doing is looking at nature and seeing how nature works and saying, well, if language is natural in any sort of, in any sort of way, then obviously it's going to mirror nature. So A through M, N through Z. Now, basically what I did is I walked up the 6 days of creation and rested on the 7th, putting numbers to the letters as we walk up. So we're going to take A through M. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So we're going to go A, B, C, D, E, F, G being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're going to rest on G, and that's the 7. Now, this comes from the Genesis, right?
Right.
This is the 6 days of God doing work and resting on the 7th, right? Well, what this is actually referring to is the three-dimensional mathematics of every single point of consciousness in creation. It's the 300, it's once again, forward, reverse, up, down, left, and right. That's 6 directions of space resting on a central point. And that point is you. That's the point of consciousness of the human being.
Boom.
So this is what Genesis is actually referring to. Notice Genesis is a derivation of the word genetics. Yeah. This is where we get genealogy, generation. Well, what do you think a genius is?
Right.
Someone who understands, etc. So we have this motif. This is a motif that, once again, permeates our entire reality, the unification of opposites. So 6 days of God doing work, resting on the seventh. We're just going to take this idea, lay it on the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, instead of going 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, etc., we're going to just walk back down. So we're going to climb up the hill, the holy mountain, if you will, and then we're going to walk back down. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. H, I, J, K, L, M is 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mm-hmm. So that establishes the numbers to the letters of the first half of our alphabet. We're going to stop there a second, and we're just going to pause and say, okay, notice when we walked up, we went A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We stopped on the G. Mm-hmm. Well, this is the 7 notes of the major scale, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right?
Right.
Also, if you notice, that's the Freemasonic square and compasses.
Yeah.
There's a compass pointing up and a square pointing down, and there's a G in the center there. Well, one of the things that compass is referring to, one of the myriad things that this compass and square, this insignia is referring to, is the study and art of gematria. And that's why that G is in there. Now, the compass creates a circle, and the square, of course, creates a square, right? Pretty simple geometry. Mm-hmm. Well, in sacred geometrical study, heaven is known as a circle, as a 3, and earth is known as a 4, as a square. So you have this concept of the merging of 3 and 4. Well, what is 3 plus 4? It's 7, and G is the 7th letter of the English alphabet. Mm-hmm. So you have the Freemasonic square and compasses telling you about the concepts of heaven and earth, and also the concepts of 3 and 4 merging together to become 7, and this is referring to gematria. So this is one of the things, and like I said, one of the myriad things that the compass and square is trying to purvey to humanity. And I actually have an entire video. It's like a 30-minute video showing all the things that you can get from this, and it's just insane. So that's why we're stopping on that G. 3 dimensions of, the 6 dimensions of space resting on the 7th, and etc. So then so basically that establishes our first block of letters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, notice we created symmetry. We created this balance or this mirroring with these 13 blocks of letters, right?
Right.
A through M, N through Z. All we're going to do is, because of economy, because of simplicity, because of elegance, because of beauty, we're just going to take those numbers and throw them onto the other side of the alphabet. So N, O, P, Q, R, S, T is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then U, V, W, X, Y, Z is 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mm-hmm. And what this does is establishes the numbers to the letter, the correlation, numbers to letter correlation to the English alphabet. So this is really easy to write out. If you're at home, you can just write this out: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, and then right below it go N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z, and then just write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you have the cipher, the cryptogram for the English alphabet that is being decoded or encoded, concealed within the emblem of the Freemasonic square and compasses. So now what you can do is find pi within this. You can find pi actually twice within this cipher. What is pi? Pi is the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. So it's a mathematical constant, and it's really kind of been it's a mystery, man. There's something very elusive about pi, right? Because pi is this infinite number, right? It's an infinite, transcendental, irrational number. And when you say irrational, it just means that there's no ratio that we have, mm-hmm. No two whole numbers that we can divide to find this particular string of digits. This number just goes on and on and on. It's 3.1415926535897. This thing just goes on. There's been 10 trillion digits of pi that have been calculated thus far, and yet we can't see the tail end of this thing. So it's really this central focus, this mystery within our creation that's embedded within mathematics that really kind of helps us question, gives us some clues into what's going on in our world. So pi is a central focus. So pi is abbreviated 3.142. This is a very common abbreviation. And what's important to understand is that pi must be abbreviated at some point. It doesn't matter if you're doing algebra or engineering or architecture, any of that stuff. You have to abbreviate pi because of its infinite nature. So 3.142. So now we can go back to our cipher and pull out the non-prime numbers. So a prime number is a number divisible by 1 in itself. So the prime numbers would be 2, 3, 5, 7, 5, 3, 2. Well, the non-prime numbers would be 1, 4, 6, and 6, 4, 1. So we're going to pull out the non-prime numbers. 1, 4, 6, 6, 4, 1. 1 plus 4 plus 6 plus 6 plus 4 plus 1 equals 22. And 22, notice there's only there's the number 7 that the whole thing is balanced on. It's the center, the G and T. 22 divided by 7 is 3.142. It's an approximation of pi. So, and what's really interesting is when we once again we looked at the Freemasonic square and compasses to help us decode this. We looked at a symbol to help us decode this. The quote unquote Jewish menorah is symbolizing this very thing.
Right.
Because you can actually literally lay the Jewish menorah on the non-prime numbers, and then the central pillar would lead to the 7. And I've got several videos on this that you can double check this all yourself, and you can do it yourself.
And one thing I wanted to throw out real quick was when people are visualizing, one thing that I thought was great that I saw in one of your videos, if you look at a Ouija board, the letters on the Ouija board, the alphabet on the board is separated A through M, and then right underneath it, N through Z in an arc-like pattern. And the top of the arc, the very highest point, is the center, the G and the T. And that's kind of interesting. And then if you can imagine taking a menorah and laying it on them, on the alphabet, on the Ouija board pattern, these are the nodes where the candles would sit. These are the numbers that add up to pi. I mean, this is pretty interesting stuff, man.
Yeah, actually, it's funny you bring up the Ouija board because this third volume, that's because basically I explain the cipher. I have 3 books, and I explain the cipher in different ways in each one of the books. So one, I use the Freemasonic square and compasses and the tetragrammaton. Another one is dice, et cetera. And the next one is going to be the Ouija board to explain exactly what you just said.
Oh, that's awesome.
So when you look at the Ouija board, one of the things, it's like, okay, what is the Ouija board? Well, it's used to contact spirits of the dead, and you're going to talk to your grandmother in another dimension or something. Well, no, really, what it's there to do when you strip away all the the bullshit, if you will, is pass on deep occult truths about the nature of our language. So
yeah.
So basically, once again, we establish pi on 2 sides of our alphabet, A through M and N through Z. So pi begotten by 7, if you will, 3.142, pi begotten by 7, 3.142. Well, when you bring these 2 pi's together, one of the symbolic representations of the tetragrammaton, which is the holy name of God, it's known as Jehovah or Yahweh, is known as pi 7, pi 7. And this is exactly what we find in our alphabet. So bringing the 2 pi's together, you get this symbolic representation of God, if you will. Well, why this is important, it's called the tetragrammaton. Gramma means message, and it's where we get the word grammar. So it's like, okay, here's this representation of God, that's supposedly told to us in a book, and then it's like, okay, well, where do we find this thing? Well, obviously it's telling us it has something to do with language. This also, and we can't get into this right now, but this is also one of the things they're talking about when they say in the beginning was, God, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Talking about a word, we're talking about language. So we can't really get into that right now. But one of the other things that is important about the tetragrammaton is the tetragrammaton in Hebrew gematria was 𝐓he 𝐌athematical 𝐂ode. And this was the numbers 5, 6, 5, 10. Well, this equals 26. And there's 26 letters of the English alphabet.
Wow.
So, but even more. Now we're going to take our cipher that we just deconstructed, and we're going to go to the names of God that we have in the Holy Bible. And there's 2 names of God, and they're combined to become Lord God. So there's Lord and God. Lord in the cipher is LORD is 2254. This equals 13. And God in this cipher, 724. GOD is 724. This equals 13. So we have 13 and 13, and we bring it together, and what do we get? 26. So the tetragrammaton in Hebrew gematria equals 26. There's 26 letters of the English alphabet, and we look at the name of Lord God using the cipher that I got from the Holy Bible, and it equals 26.
Man, it fits pretty well.
It does. And you say, okay, well, it's just a coincidence. You're just playing with math. But no, I'm not playing with math, because what you're doing is there's an exactitude and precision, and anybody that uses this cipher will get the exact same results 100% of the time, 100% of the time. So the problem with anybody that wants to make some sort of criticism against this is that all you're doing is, if you're going to criticize this or try to tear this down, all you're doing is criticizing empiricism. All you're doing is criticizing the scientific method, because that's what I'm using is mathematics. Well, how do you think modern science interprets the world and deconstructs the world? They use math, man. So you're going to get the same results every single time. And so that's just this, that's the cipher in a nutshell, if you will. Now, another important thing is, once again, we rested on 7. God rested on 7. Now, 7 is an extremely important number, right? I mean, everybody knows, even if you've never studied comparative mythology or done interdisciplinary studies or, know anything about mathematics, you've obviously known that 7 is a very important number throughout myth and spirituality and things like that. 7 days of creation, 7 chakras, 7 deadly sins, 7 notes of the major scale, 7 stars of the Pleiades, 7 the Big Dipper,
days a week,
7 days a week, 7 tablets of the Enuma Elish, 7, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You could just go on and on and on about the number 7. 7 in the cipher, SEVEN, is 65551. This equals 22. 22 divided by 7 is pi. So the number 7 in and of itself encodes pi, period. End of story, fact. You can double check it yourself. And then as you say, okay, so now we have tetragrammaton, Lord God, the number of English, letters in the English alphabet, all coinciding in this harmonious, beautiful way. And then you look at the number 7 and it encodes pi as well. And you say, okay, how is this even possible?
Right.
And yet it is. It is.
Yeah, man, it's real trippy. And I've heard you summarize this work by saying language and numbers have a fundamental relationship that speaks to the interconnectedness of all things. And that sounds really great. But there's a slight disconnect for me. I mean, it seems to all fit, but when I'm trying to figure out why, I think about geometric principles are natural. Numbers and quantities exist in nature, but language is like a man-made invention. And unless you count Klingon and Dothraki, English is a fairly modern language. So they must have just put incredible detail into forming it, I guess, to make it all fit, right?
This really gets to the question of when man creates something, when you and I create something, as obviously as an artist or whatever, if I write a song or whatever, where does that come from?
Right, the muse, maybe.
Yeah, where does it come from? Now, obviously, I say artists are secretaries for angelic revelation, if you will. That we dictate things that come from the other, the ether, the invisible landscape, the astral plane, the nation of images that is your imagination. You're bringing these things down and bringing them into the material world and interpreting them. But so much, especially when you talk to a lot of artists, I've heard, I feel this way. I've heard, I don't know how many musicians talk about this. I've heard stand-up comics talk about this, that when they're in that mode of creation, they're a conduit for it, that they're bringing it out, that they're just opening themselves up so they can bring it out. I've heard Chris Cornell talk about this. I've heard Adam Duritz say this. I've heard Tom Waits talk about this. I've heard, like I said, a bunch of comedians talk about this. In fact, in jazz music, this is called real gone. It's where you're so in the moment that you're just bringing these things out. Well, in my opinion, when these people that were creating the languages at the time were basically aligning themselves, if you will, with these fundamental principles in creation and allowing this stuff to just flow out of them, with this deep understanding of the nature of reality, And this is why it became sacred. This is why all of these ideas became sacred. Because they were realizing that, and this is really what you're talking about is the way. You're talking about the Tao. You're talking about the ever-flowing way of creation. Well, an artist or somebody who's in tune, a shaman, a psychonaut or whatever, anybody that's in tune with that is getting aboard, is jumping into the river and flowing with it, and allowing that river to take them, where they need to go. And this is where the creative impulse, I feel, comes from, So this is where we have to really step back and say, okay, yeah, well, this is impossible because man created language, or no, language has just evolved. Well, really, we don't know. I have no idea. You don't know. Nobody that's listening really, truly knows. And we can't go back in history to say, yes, this is exactly what happened. But we can do is take a look at it now and deconstruct it and say, yes, there was intention there, and that there are definitely sacred principles embedded within it. Now, why this is important is pi is a constant in mathematics. And pi is encoded within our alphabet. So the people that were trying to pass on this information to us absolutely understood pi and absolutely understood the nature of the importance of pi, And what's also important is man didn't make math. We didn't create numbers. We didn't create mathematics. We didn't create geometry. All we're doing is interpreting it from the great creator, the grand architect, nature, the cosmos, the universe, whatever the fuck it is you want to call this thing. We're interpreting it and bringing it into our world to help us understand our relationship with it.
Yeah, well said, man. And I wanted to double back to the square and compass for a minute because I'm watching all these videos, I'm listening to all these presentations, and I tried to mess with some of these numbers myself, and I was thinking about the square and compass. And if the circle is 3 and the square is 4, that makes 34, and there's supposed to be 33 degrees of masonry. The 32 and then the honorary 33. I wonder if there's a secret degree of masonry that nobody talks about above 33 because the numbers do equal 34.
Man, there's so many different places we could go here because we could look at 34, we could look at 43.
It's just a curiosity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When you look at the 33 degrees of Scottish Rite Freemasonic Ascension, right? Number 33 is steeped in esoterica and occult, right? I mean, once again, this is just something that even if you haven't really studied these things, chances are you came across the number 33, Right. When you look at 3 plus 4 is 7, right? Well, there's 7 chakras in your endocrine system. Now, if you don't believe in the chakra system or whatever, well, you really don't have to. But you do know that there are places where the nerve currents come together, and there are 7 points of these. And that's just straight anatomy, So you have the 7 chakras that are on your spine, right? Well, there are 33 bones in your spinal column. So you have the numbers, the heaven and earth coming together, and referring to the number 33. And once again, you see, it's attached to the number 7. It's attached to the Freemasonic square. The whole thing. It really allows you to pull all this together. The other thing about 33 is that 33 is actually 34. Well, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, you forgot one thing. You forgot the 0, giving you 34 digits. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. to 33, giving you 34 digits. A lot of times when we do mathematics, we forget about the first number or non-number is basically refers to the immateriality of the other side, if you will.
Good point.
So, and another important thing about this is that every single mathematical system that you use incorporates the 0. Like for instance, we're on the internet right now, and the internet is a binary system, but it's not a system of 1 and 2. It's a system of 0 and 1.
Yeah.
So that's just one way to understand that. If you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about this idea of the concepts of heaven and earth.
Sure.
What the hell that even means, and why is it referred to a compass and square? When I say heaven, most people refer to heaven as in that we are understood through the literalist or fundamentalist, what a lot of times it's called fundamentalist version of the Bible, right? Mm. The people read this document as a historical textbook, if you will. Well, it's not. There's nothing real about the thing. It's a story of myth. It's a symbolic stories, and you're not supposed to take any of this literally. The first verse of the Bible is Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Well, by relating these things, what they're doing is trying to teach you about geometry. So by relating these things to geometry, what we can start to understand is the nature of our own minds and the limitations of our own minds, and how we can really understand the archetypal way that we think, the symbolic way that we think, and how we interact with our world. Heaven is known as a circle, as a 3, and earth is known as a 4, as a square. Okay, let's break this down. The circle encapsulates the most amount of space, right? Mm-hmm. So if you take a length of string and you make it a square or a any sort of polygon, a square, a rectangle, a triangle, if you make it a circle, that circle will encapsulate the most amount of space, the most amount of area, period. That's just the way it works. So really what you have there with the inherent or innate symbolism of the circle is you have the all, or the entirety of the wholeness that is encapsulating. Now, what's important about the circle is that we can never truly find its area. Right. Why? Because we have to use pi. We have to use pi. And pi, at one point, we have to approximate, as we were talking about before. So we can never, ever truly find the area of a circle. Why this is important is, why is it related to heaven? Because we can never truly measure the heavens.
Yeah, it's the infinite. It's the
infinite, right? And that makes sense. That makes sense that it would be attributed to a circle because, like I said, pi is this infinite number. We can't see its tail. We look out into the heavens. How far does this shit go? We don't know. Where's the edge of the universe? I don't know. But now look at a square. A square is Earth. Well, we can measure the Earth. We can can take a length of tape and measure this thing, right?
True.
So, and now when we look at the square, we can always find the area of a square. Always. Because all we have to do is square something. So if the length of a side of a square is 2, well, 2 times 2, or 2 squared, is 4. So therefore, we know the area of a square. So this is why heaven is known as a circle, and the infinite, and Earth is known as a square. And so this is why and once again, this is not me just, placing these ideas on this. This is something inherent in the geometry. Now, this motif of heaven being a circle and Earth being a square is all over. It's in Buddhism. It's in when they build this thing that's called it's this semi-hemispherical structure called the Buddhist stupa, and they use this motif of heaven being a circle and Earth is a square. In alchemy, you have the same thing. One of my favorite alchemical illustrations is the one I reference all the time. It's called Rebus, and it's by I'm forgetting his name right now. Sorry, but you can look this up, and it's basically this man, this human being that's got a head of a woman and a man, and he's carrying she, the hermaphrodite, is carrying a square and compasses, and it's standing on a circle. And in that circle is the numbers 3 and 4. And so we see it in alchemy, we see it in Buddhism, we see it in the Judeo-Christian canon with, Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created heaven and the earth. We also see it in the Freemasonic square and compasses. So this is an idea that's prevalent all over, Yeah. And so all we have to do is actually go to the mathematical language of creation to understand what it is they're referring to.
Yeah, man, it just blows my mind. And I think you also showed in the video, I believe the symbols for the 7th letters in and out of the Egyptian hieroglyphic alphabet also sort of symbolize pi too, right?
Oh, sure, yeah. Where the G and T in the Egyptian language, are actually the 180 semicircle, and then the other one I think is I'm not sure which one it is. I think it's it's escaping me now, but
the other one's like a delta and something else which refers to 180 degrees as well.
Exactly. And so you have basically 180 degrees on the G and then 180 degrees on the T. And I think the T is the one the G is the one where it's a vessel or a cup. And then there's the triangle that's put in there, yes. And of course, esoterically and symbolically, spiritually, this is referring to the vessel that is you. Mm-hmm. You're the vessel. The vessel is, and then you're capturing the Holy Trinity within. And so you take the G and T on both sides, if you will, of the Egyptian alphabet and you put it together. Well, what do you have? You have the 360 degrees of a circle, and that is split within 180. Well, what is that? Well, that's the geometry of pi. That's what it would be referring to. So you have this same idea within the Egyptian hieroglyphs as well. Yeah,
that's so weird to me that you can take totally separate languages, lay out their alphabets, mirror one side to the other, look at the symbols in the middle, which would be another halving of it, and they reference pi. It's like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah, but the idea they're only seemingly separate.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you understand that there's an interconnectivity of number that lays the foundation of our creation, that underpins everything that we do, whether the words that are coming out of our mouth, how coastlines and mountain ranges are formed, things like that, then you realize that the Egyptians weren't some alien species that were living, a few thousand years ago. No, they were just like us, and they were whether we are cognizant of it or not, are using the same principles of geometry and number that are embedded in creation. And so it allows us to see that, no, we're not separate, even though the languages might sound different, even though the word constructions are different and things like that. But it still allows us to bring all these different things together, understanding that beneath it is the numbers.
Yeah, man, it would be really interesting to find out if some linguists or people who know like 10, 12 languages, I wonder if they subconsciously tap into the recognition of these patterns to make it easier.
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I know the problem with modern day, philology and linguists and things like that is that there isn't any sort of cross study, that there isn't the interdisciplinary study where it's like, I'm a linguist, so that's what I study. I study languages. Well, in order to truly understand language, if it is built off number, well, you better understand mathematics as well. Mm-hmm. We have the same problem right now with a lot of people that are consider themselves scientists or whatever, that guys like Lawrence Krauss and Neil deGrasse Tyson or Richard Dawkins and things like that. Well, Richard Dawkins is an evolutionary biologist, right? Mm-hmm. Neil deGrasse Tyson is a theoretical physicist or whatever, or Lawrence Krauss is a theoretical physicist. Well, so if we're going to them for their explanation of the world, well, that's the explanation that we're going to get. We're going to get the explanation from a theoretical physicist. So they're going to look at the world as a theoretical physicist. They're not going to look at the world as, a sacred geometrician. They're not going to look at the world as a poet. They're not going to look at the world as a psychologist. They're not going to look at the world as a symbologist, things like this. And I think a true holy science, the true science that is going to help us understand who we are and where we came from and what we're doing here and the nature of reality, is bringing all facets together. That's what a true science scientist is. And when you look at all of the ancient like polymaths of the world, guys like, Da Vinci and Isaac Newton, they were into all sorts of shit, man.
Yeah.
It's not like they were just, I'm a physicist. So I understand what's at the heart of an atom or something. No, man, they were looking at symbols. They were looking at, poetry, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that this is what we really need to do if we're going to understand our reality, is bring all facets together. So the modern day, there's sort of this like pulse that's going through the collective consciousness, right, or the paradigm that exists right now. And that's it's one that's based on science, but it's not really based on science. That you're actually incorrect there, because a scientist is going to explore every single avenue. A scientist is not just going to explore one slice of the pie or two slices of the pie or 14 slices of the pie. It's going to understand the 360 degrees of that thing. And that means you have to bring in every single facet of our reality together into one holistic science.
Yeah, well said, man. And to take it back to schools, like we talked in the beginning, the nefarious design of schools, there are no subjects that are more divided than literary students and math. I mean, science and art. Those are the two divisions. And separating language and math, again, it seems like a very concerted effort is made to make sure that few people specialize in both.
Well, it's not even taught whatsoever. I mean, you can buy books. This is what what we talked about before. Going back to this, it's like you can buy. I have probably 4 or 5 books on my shelf that I'm looking at right now that exactly talk about the fact that there are mathematics behind languages. Go to any college and see if you can try to find that. Maybe they're out there, and maybe I'm just not. I just don't know about them. But I certainly wasn't taught that. In fact, I just had I just did the Sync Book Summit this past weekend, and I took a few days off work, and I came back to work, and my bosses they were asking me, because they really don't know what it is I do, so they were asking me, it's like, what do you do? Is it numerology or what, And so I started saying, well, there's mathematics to languages and things like that, and they were just kind of like dumbfounded. There's just this straight blank look on their face, because it's like, well, I was never taught that in college, and I'm like, yeah, no shit, and no shit, you weren't. Does that mean it's not a legitimate study? No. Right. It's absolutely a legitimate study. This thing is that you're not going to be taught these things. And this is where occultism and esoterica and things like that come in, because it's kind of the subversive studies that you're not going to be taught in any sort of, like I said, classroom or things like that. So. Well,
you mentioned the Sync Summit, and my good friend Fredericks was supposed to be up there. I don't think he made it, but
I know. I was so bummed, man. I got to meet him at the Free Your Mind conference, and yeah, he's a really great guy.
He is.
I was really looking forward to speaking to him again, but yeah, he just couldn't make it because of funds,
Mm-hmm. And one of my questions for you was going to be what your thoughts on synchronicity, because I'm sure this kind of ties into what you work with.
Yeah, I mean, synchronicity is. When people start to get into the study of synchronicity, I mean, mainly it was kind of brought forward by Carl Jung, the Jungian study of psychology and philosophy and things like that. Mm-hmm. When you get into synchronicity, you realize that one of the things that synchronicity allows you to understand is the world is not built as a machine. It's not this nuts and bolts, cogs and gears kind of thing. That the world is more, for lack of a better term, magical and mystical. It's a story that's being played out. And when you have synchronicities that happen, you can't. The thing that is very important is you can't just step back and say, oh, it's all Illuminati, New World Order, or some global cabal or control faction that's running everything. That's that has their hands in every single. It's like. Mm-hmm. A good example is what just happened with Robin Williams, right? Right. Robin Williams, he hung himself in a door, right? And supposedly, whatever. And then, of course, you had this Family Guy episode that was going to air that night or something like that, or the night before or whatever, and they ended up taking it down. And it's like, okay, well, Jesus, what are the chances, right? Well, how many people online automatically go to, well, it's the Illuminati, it's the Council on Foreign Relations that's doing it all, and they planned Robin Williams' death. I don't know, maybe, but I mean, honestly, when you look at this, you have to understand that there's something much more going on, that you can't look at all of the synchronicities in the world and blame it on some New World Order or some Illuminati or the Skull and Bone Society or, whatever it is, that there's something much more going on here. Now, the people that are in power, the quote unquote Illuminati, whoever it is, I think, in my opinion, they understand that this is how the world works. And so they use that to their benefit. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that they control everything. It's impossible to control everything. No one's in control. Control is CONTROL. This is 3217522. This equals 22. There's 7 letters in control. 22 divided by 7 is pi. What's in control? The universe is in control. The great, The great creator is in control. Synchronicities allow you to understand that this is one way that the universe works. That it's like I said, it's not some cut and dry nuts and bolts kind of thing. That there's a magic to it, and this is why I think synchronicity is a very important thing.
I love when you break down certain words and put them on the cipher, because another one that just drove me nuts was the word knowledge equals 33, which is 33 degrees of masonry, and they hold knowledge. You know, it seems like they know what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, like common sense equals 33. I think virtue equals 33. Knowledge. Abecedarian. Abecedarian is a person who understands. It's a person who studies the alphabet. That's what an AB is, of course, alphabet. Abecedarian equals 33.
And you did a video on Hermes Trismegistus, and that had an interesting equation there.
Let's do this. Hermes equals 28. So HERMES is 655. What is it? 655156. This equals 28, right? Mm-hmm. Hermes was also known as Thoth. Right. Thoth is THOTH. This is 76276. And so that equals 28. So you have the same mythological character being Hermes and Thoth, both equaling 28. Right. Well, Hermes is known as Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus. This is also the Roman god Mercury. Right. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about the planet Mercury, the closest planet to the sun. The orbital path of Mercury is 88 days. Right? So it just whips around the sun super fast, 88 days. Well, 88 divided by 28, Thoth and Hermes equals pi. It's 3.142. So now, that's an absolutely arbitrary connection. You're just putting the number of paths of the path of the Mercury and then putting it to 28. Okay, now let's step back and say, look at your hands right now. Look at your hands. If you're out there, look at your hands and count. You have two sections, or what they're called segments, or they're called phalanges, on your thumb. So there's 1, 2. It allows you to get that 90 degree of your thumb to bend and grasp and grip the world. 2 sections on your thumb, and then you have 3 on each finger. So you have 4 fingers, 3 on each, so that's 12. And then you have 2 on your thumb, being 14. So the segments of your hand equal 14, correct? So 14. So you have 2 hands. Well, that would be 28. So the number 28 is on your hands, right?
Yeah.
A grand piano is 88 keys. Right? The grand piano is 88 keys. So when you put your 2 hands on the piano and you start playing, whatever it is, Franz Liszt or, Happy Birthday, whatever the fuck it is you play on the piano, 88 keys and 28 phalanges. 88 divided by 28 is pi. Well, that's why you're playing the pi ano.
And
that's the exact math. And you could say, well, whatever, but what about there's 71 or 61 keys and things like that? But no, the grand piano, and why the grand piano has 88 keys is because this is basically the range that human beings hear at. It's a 7 1/3 octaves, and you can even go to a piano and hit that low key. It's like, and then the real one, ting, 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 ting. Anything beyond that, it's like the human being can't essentially hear it. So that's why there's 88 keys on the piano, because it's understanding that whoever created the piano understood the principles of number, understood the resonances and harmonies that are built within creation, and that they're built right on our hands.
Yeah.
So
that's
just one way of
So, we talked about the mirroring of the alphabet, and G is the 7th letter in, and then if you go from the back, the 7th letter would be T, and T is pretty important as well. You want to go into the T a little bit?
Yeah, so when we stopped in G, and that was the Freemasonic square and compasses, that was number 7, right? And so we saw that 7, the word itself encoded pi, equaled 22, and 22 divided by the word 7 is 3.142. So now where we stopped on the other hand was D, as you were saying, and T is known in mathematics as tau. Well, where pi is the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, tau is known as the ratio of a circle's circumference to its radius, so half the diameter. And this is twice pi. So it's 6.28 instead of 3.14, if you will. So these are 2 fundamentals in mathematics. Once again, these are prominent constants in mathematics, pi and tau. The tau cross in mysticism is it's all over, and basically all it is 2 lines coming together to create a T. Well, what are those 2 lines? Well, just stick your arms out and put your feet together, and your whole body creates a cross. It creates a T. And this is one of the things that Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man is actually trying to unveil to us. The Vitruvian man is the circle and a square. And in between that circle and the square is the ancient Roman architect Vitruvius. And this was sketched by Leonardo da Vinci just in his sketchbook. Just this really small thing that's, it really captivated artists for a long time. Because well, what is he trying to refer to? Well, what he's doing is referring to the tau cross, tau in mathematics, the circle and square, heaven and earth, 3 and 4. And the tau is extremely important because really the tau is the tau cross really. I'm going to get into mysticism a little bit here, but really what the tau is representing is the cross of matter. The cross of matter, that your body is the vessel. Once again, it's the car, the vehicle that the energy of the universe resides in and is descends into. Now we know that this material world will pass, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you're born into this world and you're going to die. Somebody's going to watch you die. You're going to watch your body get put into the ground, and you're going to eventually disintegrate. And then we say, well, what happens to that energy? Well, by giving us pi and tau, we understand that pi is a representation of a fundamental representation of the creation of our universe with its infinite nature, its transcendental nature, in the fact that we can't see the tail end of it. It's representing infinity. But tau gives us the idea that, okay, that pi, if you will, the energy of the universe, goes into that material world. And so it's bringing both of these things together, and it's bringing them together through mathematics, once again. Something that we didn't create, something that the universe created to help us understand who we are. So I know I may not be hitting that directly, I may not be addressing what I'm trying to say directly, but that's just one of the things that we can get with tau. Now, tau is very important. In fact, there's been a debate about whether to use tau or pi when understanding mathematics. Like, so for instance, when you look at a sine wave, sine and cosine, and understanding like the fundamentals of trigonometry, right? Well, tau and pi are both used, but tau is actually easier to use because when you measure the center of a circle to the edge, you don't measure the diameter. You measure the radius. The radius is always 1. So you get that? But the diameter in pi is 1. So, but we never measure it that way. We always, whenever we perform mathematics, we always start from the center and go out to the edge, and that's the radius. And so that's 1. And so tau is an easier way to help us understand this, but they're both important, and that's why they're both on the central G and T of our alphabet, because it's trying, once again, these ancient people that understood this stuff implicitly, or were trying to pass this information on to us.
Yeah. Something else I was curious about, man, and you've touched on this in other talks and other interviews, but when you think about the intelligent design of the universe, the Fibonacci sequence, phi ratio, and all these things, do you think that some of these truths that we extrapolate would come to folks more naturally if they spent more time in nature or with a certain kind of mindfulness? It seems like their level of exposure in the natural world is pretty perfect. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, this is, when people have asked me, like, okay, well, how did you figure this stuff out? How did you come about this information? What drew you to this? Well, I mean, number one, I've spent a lot of time reading all of these absolutely fantastic researchers, guys like John Michel, guys like Michael S. Schneider, Ari Schwalder de Lubitz, John Anthony West, watching guys like Scott Onstott and reading his books, Randall Carlson. There's a bunch of researchers that I've spent and learned so much from them, and I'm trying to purvey this information. But one of the other ways that I came to understand this was spending a whole shitload of time in nature. I mean, I'm like an avid hiker. I'm like pretty much every weekend I would go out and I'd go hiking, spending just a ton of time in nature, basically just alone with my thoughts in this sort of contemplative, contemplative meditative state, and like kind of just being within nature and looking at it. One of the first, let's go into something here.
Sure.
Actually, and to try to explain what I'm saying, there's in numerology, one of the base numerological principles is called decimal parity. It's called digital rooting. It's called Kabbalistic reduction. It's called Pythagorean addition. But it's this basic idea of understanding, once again, the qualitative, the essences of number. And what it is you take a sum of a number. So we're going to look at the number 134, right? And all we're going to do is go 1 + 3 + 4 = 8. right? This is the crux of numerology, if you will. Now, what numerology allows you to understand is that there are basically 10 principles in the universe that create the universe, 10 emanations of God, as it's called in the 𝐓he 𝐌athematical 10 fundamental archetypes that are embedded in number that allow us to interact with nature and understand it. And this is why you have 10 fingers. And this is the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, being 10 numbers. This is the base of numerology. When you go beyond 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, you can break any of those numbers down to the digits 1 through 9. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We get to 10. 10 is 1 plus 0 is 1. 11, 1 plus 1 is 2. 12, 1 plus 2 is 3, etc. It doesn't matter how big or complex the number, you can always break it down to the numbers 1 through 9. And with adding the 0, giving you 10 digits, and once again, you see that as on your 2 hands. Now, I was hiking one time, and this is before I had written my first book, 𝐵e the Great Work, which is no longer in print. It's just a short run because it was just kind of a... Anyway, before I was writing this book, I was exploring these ideas, and I was hiking in nature, and I was, as Joe Rogan likes to say, high as giraffe pussy, and and I was walking, and I looked down, and I live in Oregon, and all of the trilliums were in bloom, right? And the trillium is this beautiful flower, and it's got these 3 big leaves, and then it's got and then there's like a central stalk in the middle, and then there's 3 other leaves, and then it's got the 3 petals or the flower on top. And I was walking, and I was just walking, and they're all over, and I just stop, and I look down, and I'm like, huh. I look at this thing, and I'm like, okay, the central stalk is the 0. You have 1, 2, 3, first level. Second level is 4, 5, 6. Next level. The top level is 7, 8, 9. And this is how the trillium is built. And I'm not joking, man. I must have sat there for 5, 10 minutes just looking at this thing being like, huh. And it was then that it clicked. That this was, if you will, the fundamentals of numerology. And this is the fundamentals that help build our creation. And I understood this through a flower.
Right.
I didn't go to a classroom and said, hey, this is how this works, And it was only when you go to the mathematics and you go to the number logic of numerology that it helps you understand that, yes, that's true. Because that's just how the math works. And so this is one of the things that when you're talking about going into nature and understanding these principles of nature, they're all over nature, man. This is what fractals is. This, you can understand the Fibonacci sequence. You can understand the degree of phyllotaxis. All you have to do is go out in nature and see it for yourself.
Yeah, man. And another example you gave that for some people they might think it's a stretch, but I thought it was really interesting is when you're talking about pi. So of course we have the sun, and the only time you can look at the sun without hurting your eyes is sunrise and sunset, when the horizon halves the circle and boom, it's right there. It may have taken a long time, but that seems like a brilliant way for the universe to reveal tau to us, or pi, or that kind of mathematical equation.
Yeah. So when you look at the sun rising and setting on the horizon creates the diameter to find the circumference of the sun. Right. And of course, I would say that, I don't know because I didn't live back then, but I'm guessing that the ancient people that were, inquisitive and looking into the universe or whatever, eventually looked at that and were like, huh, that's interesting. Right. I understand that there's a line and a circle, and maybe I can triangulate that and then therefore understand how big the sun is, something like that. Right. What's important, though, is that, that's the only time that you can actually look at the sun is when the sun is creating pi in our sky. Now, horizon, HORIZON. Horizon comes from the word Horus. This is where we get the word hours, right?
Right.
When you and you look at your watch to look at the hours, what are you doing? You're watching the sun. So Horus, horizon, the zone of Horus. This is where we get a horoscope. Horus, the ancient Egyptian sun god, right? Horology is the study of the measurement of time. So all of these things are coming from an ancient Egyptian god of Horus, Ra. Horizon in the English cipher, HORIZON, is 6255121. This equals 22. Horizon has 7 letters. 22 divided by 7 is pi. Morning, MOR, I'm not going to do all the numbers. You can check this yourself. Morning equals 22. 22 divided by 7 is pi. What happens when the sun rises on the horizon? It's morning. So both of those words that are referring to this astronomical event that we see every single day equals pi. What else is important? The sun actually creates pi in our sky because the sun rises on the horizon and sets. And, Set is, of course, the Egyptian sun god, or the Egyptian, the antithesis of Horus, Set. So the sun rises and it creates a 180-degree arc over our sky. And then what happens? Well, that's day, and then it becomes night. What does it do? Mythologically, it goes around us, if you will. Now, I understand the mechanics of that the Earth revolves around the sun. Don't get me wrong. But you understand what I'm saying, that from our perspective, that's what we see. Well, that's creating pi every single day. It's cutting night and day into half, 180 degrees, 180 degrees. You know?
Yeah.
So that's yet another reference to pi that we see that just happens from our perspective every single day. Now, I want to say something here too, that the sun revolves around the Earth. Let me say that again. The sun revolves around the Earth. Okay, this guy's batshit crazy. No, we know that the Earth revolves around the sun, stupid, right? No, actually, it's both. Because from our perspective, the sun does revolve around us, period, from our perspective. Now, the mechanics of the thing, if we took ourselves and that's our perspective from Earth. But if we take the perspective from the heavens, we see that the Earth revolves around the sun. So to truly understand our relationship to the creation, we have to take in account both perspectives. Not just the one perspective.
Yeah.
You know, modern science is trying to take the human perspective out of it, right?
Exactly.
And this is ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd. And we're starting on, and I don't like to get into quantum theory because there's so much quote unquote quantum quackery out there. But we understand this with the observer effect in quantum physics, that the observer is absolutely instrumental in understanding, you know, our relationship to the creation. So therefore, understanding how we view the sun and how it revolves around us is just as important as understanding how we revolve around the sun, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely. And that was an area I was planning to go to, but it is kind of funny that the universe has designed things to take our perspective into account. It is important, but then, like you said, science is trying to look at things totally objectively and filter that out. And it's like, well, it's not designed to be looked at that way, as odd as that might sound.
This is, once again, this is the coincidentia positorum. This is this ancient philosophical idea that really helps us understand. It's not just objective, it's subjective as well, you know, and it's bringing both together. If you ignore one, you're not going to get the full spectrum, you know. If you say, oh, it's just an objective understanding of the universe, it's the same thing with, you know, we could say spiritual and material, if you will, or celestial and terrestrial, if you will. You know, it's these ideas. If you just understand the Earth and forget about the heavens, you're not going to get an understanding of the Earth. If you're just a theoretical physicist and are constantly looking out into the heavens and not understanding your perspective on Earth, you're not going to get a full comprehension of what we're dealing with here.
It is interesting. And looking at these clues in nature, I mean, when I look at that, I see another layer of manipulation from the puppet masters, because in Western society, we're so far separated from nature and we're focused on these dead, dirty, concrete cities. And conveniently, it's another layer of separation from these fundamental truths.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the ancient architects, the sacred geometricians of the past, the people that built Angkor Wat, the people that built the Mayan pyramids and the Egyptian pyramids, you know, people that built Pumapunku, all of these things, they understood that when they built something, they were building artistry that reflected the fundamental archetypes in creation. You know what I mean? And so therefore, we're at one. They were symbiotic with the creator, if you will, and they were bringing these things out to glorify and venerate these fundamentals in creation. So, I mean, this is what we can gather when we look all around the world and look at these ancient archaeological sites. That through the study of archaeoastronomy, understand that these things not only are embedding sacred geometric principles, not only that, but under embedding philosophical principles, embedding astronomy, star patterns and things like that. It just brings the whole thing together into one. And this shows that these ancient people were much, much more brilliant than we ever give them credit for, and I think that, this is really where, Terence McKenna was talking about the archaic revival, right? And there's been people that have, I don't want to say his name, but there's been people that have sort of been bashing the archaic revival as if we're like, that we're going to go live in fucking caves again. No, man, that's not what he's talking about. That's not what he's talking about at all. What he's talking about is bringing back the ancient wisdom that is peppered all over the universe, all over the world. And all you have to do is go to these ancient sites and understand that there are sacred principles. There are things like phi and pi and Euler's formula and things like that are embedded in things like the Great Pyramid of Giza. That cycles of time are embedded within Chichen Itza, and we can bring those back to help us re-understand and reintegrate our the way we think and how we act and how we it allows us to put our best foot forward and bring back these sacred principles and embed these into our lives. That's what an archaic revival revival is about. It's not about going to live in caves or, dumbing ourselves down. It has nothing to do with that. It's actually elevating ourselves to understand that the ancient people that lived on this planet, that were wiped out by solar storms, tsunamis, pole shifts, ice ages, whatever it was, were very intelligent. And they were so intelligent that this is the point that I like to make. When someone claims that our ancient people were intelligent, right? Oh, really? Were they? Okay, well, if they were so intelligent, don't you think that they would be intelligent enough to embed things in, for instance, our language to pass on to future generations? If they were so intelligent, they would probably know of the rise and fall and the ebb and flow and the high tides and low tides of the evolution of creation, that they would know that things would get destroyed and that mankind would have to pick himself up again and reintegrate and re-understand these things. And so they would have to leave these things to us in the future. Well, they did. And they left it in our language. They left it in ancient holy books like the Mahabharata and the Holy Bible and the Talmud. And they left it in these archaeological sites and the Gothic cathedrals. The only problem is we have to go and actually understand what they were saying. So that is what, if you will, an archaic revival is all about.
Well said, man. I really actually appreciate you saying that, especially in the context of my last show. But man, Marty, it has been a real pleasure. This is one of my favorite shows. I love your rapid fire style. I mean, all my autistic listeners are really going to love this one. But for anyone else who needs like more time, I urge you really check out the YouTube presentations. They're really good. I love whiteboard videos, and you do a great job with them. Before we go, do you want to give people some of your links again, maybe a little info on what else you're working on?
Oh, yeah, sure. My books, once again, are Pi and the English Alphabet Volume 1 and Volume 2, and I'm working on Volume 3 right now, and I'm hoping to have it out like early next year. Well, we'll see. And then I also have a book called The Peacock's Tales, The Alchemical Writings of 𝐂hade 𝐂onis, and you can get that on martyleeds33.com. And that's all available there. And I also have some DVDs and a gematria calculator you can get for your phone and stuff like that if you want. I have a record for sale called Opus Medico Musica, and you can get that on iTunes, and I believe it's still available on Amazon, and you can get it from my site as well. And I have a site on Reverb Nation that you can download, I think 2 or 3 records for free, and then buy that one if you want. So you can check that out. I have a blog at world-mysteries.com. It's, I think, maybe 8 or 9 blogs up there that you can read for absolutely free. So you can check that out. And then I also host a podcast that I just started called Marty Leeds Mathematical Radio Hour. And you can get that at the Sync book. Sync is SYNC book.com /Marty Leeds. And I'm only on like 5th or 6th episode or something like that. But I've had a ball doing it. So I just get to talk to a lot of these just fantastic researchers and just really interesting minds. So, and I'm probably going to do that for maybe like a year or something like that. So yeah, look forward to that. And like I said, most of this stuff is absolutely free. If you can investigate this seriously for like the rest of your life without ever giving me a cent of your money, so I would appreciate if you would throw some money my way, but I like to put this information out free because I think I think it's that important. So
it's a noble cause, man. This has been excellent.